Well, summer's almost over. Can you believe it? I know I can't. It feels like May was just yesterday. But with another month in the bucket that is 2023, we have a new batch of photos for me to reflect back on. I did some fun stuff this month, including a couple photo shoots with some friends of mine, which we'll get to in a minute. I also got to see my best friend get married, and I got to try some film stocks that I've never tried before. Outside of that, I would say that my photography has slowed down a little bit. Not for any real particular reason or anything, that's just the nature of life, I suppose. When you do something as a hobby, sometimes it can feel like you get pulled away from it from all sides. But recently, I made it a goal of mine to do more portrait photography of friends of mine, but also of strangers. For a long time, I was subconsciously, and sometimes consciously, avoiding human contact within my photos. But I think I can safely say that those days are done for me. I've noticed that very few things get people going more than a photo of someone's face or a lustful gaze into the camera lens. So, with that all said, let's take a look at my favorite photos that I took in August of 2023. So I'm going to do this one a little bit differently than I normally do. I honestly have a lot of favorites from this month, so I'm going to kind of break these up into clumps of favorites. I really tried my best to narrow it down to 5, but it was just not happening. So instead, this is going to be a little bit more bloated and a little bit looser than usual. Let's start off with some photos of my friend Isabella. Both of these were taken on Kodak Colorplus 200 with a Pentax K1000 and a 50mm lens. Okay, so during this photo shoot, we decided to do 3 different outfits. We were shooting around the area of Isabella's apartment so that when we were done with one outfit, we could head back to her apartment, she could put on another one, and we can head back out and take some more photos. This was the final outfit change that we did, and we're going to see the others in a little bit, but for this one, I was thinking about doing something a little bit more traditional, a little bit more glam, just some nice headshot style portraits around Brooklyn. Isabella added the touch of red lipstick, which was amazing, especially in the photo with the red background. I'll talk about that in a second. Now, Isabella has been a model and a musician for quite a while, and she's very comfortable in front of the camera. And I can't tell you how valuable this experience was working with her, because I had very little to do on my end to get a beautiful photo. She was able to manipulate her eyes and her face, as well as her body language, to convey a lot of different things and in a moment's notice, almost subconsciously. I love her stare in the first image with the pastel green background, and the reason that I included these 2 photos together is because in each one she's looking right at the camera. But given the context surrounding her, and just the finest details in her gaze at the camera, it speaks to the different ways in which someone can convey information to a viewer with just a look of the eyes and maybe some color science. In the first photo, I get a very welcoming look out of Isabella, and it also helps that the pastel greens and the yellows in the background of that photo are very inviting. In the second photo, we get a little bit of a more standoffish, don't come near me, aggressive, stern, commanding look out of Isabella, and again, it doesn't hurt that the red background acts as a bit of a warning, because we see red and we stop. Up next, we have a photo of my friend Connor wearing a spooky mask. This photo was taken on ORWO NC500 with a Pentax K1000 and a 50mm lens. Okay, so in doing these photo shoots with friends of mine, it's nice to experiment. And usually that comes with me saying, do you have anything in your closet? And then working with what I'm given. So Connor pulls out this bag of masks that he's accumulated over the years, and immediately I saw this one, and I knew I had to do something with it. We were already doing this sort of photo shoot thing on this yellow couch of his, and he said, what if I peek out from behind the couch with this mask on? And I said, that's a great idea. What if we go another step further and get your cat on the couch? And essentially, this is what we were given. So to me, the most intriguing thing about this photo comes down to the finer details. Things like the implied diagonal line that we have going from the top left of frame down to the bottom right. We kind of have this 3-point structure, these 3 subjects to latch onto. We have the light in the top left, which immediately brings us to Connor's mask, the very creepy face. And then we go down to the cat, which is connected to Connor's arm. And there's this rule in photography and art in general called the rule of threes or the rule of odds. Essentially, when you're including a group of subjects in your photo, an odd number rather than an even number will produce a more interesting and visually pleasing composition. The rule of odds taps into the brain's propensity to create order. When viewing a group of objects, we unconsciously want to keep them in pairs, but when we're faced with 3, 5, 7, 9 objects in a photograph, we have a group that can't be easily organized. With an odd number of objects, one may become dominant over the others at the very least, and it kind of makes you look longer at the image, moving between the individual elements. And that's the power of the rule of odds in photography. It essentially just creates a composition that makes the viewer's brain work a little bit harder and look a little bit longer. It also doesn't hurt that this photo contains a fairly, in my opinion, interesting set of subjects, and also, luckily for me, the cat was incredibly receptive to looking at the camera when I called out to him. Up next, we're back over to Isabella for some more photos of her. These photos were taken on ORWO NC400 with a Pentax K1000 and a 50mm lens. Okay, so before starting this whole photo shoot with Isabella, I had told her a few things about my particular style and about the things that interested me in portrait photography. I essentially explained to her that the things that draw me into portraits of people at the moment, other than things like composition and lighting, are stark contextual contrasts. My God, try saying that 3 times fast. Stark contextual contrast. And what I mean by that is two opposing forces within the frame, such as clothing, for example. Like, picture an elegant woman in a ball gown wearing clown shoes that are poking out from underneath. The idea is that your eye should be focused on the beautiful woman, but it's drawn downward to the ridiculous clown shoes. There's also the added symbolic element of a woman in clown shoes based on the foolish stereotypes that are often placed on women, that they should suppress their whimsical attributes in favor of their traditionally feminine qualities like desirability, elegance, purity, what have you. The clown shoe thing is just an example, but the idea is to create contextual contrast and utilize absurdity and subvert expectations. So I brought all this up to Isabella beforehand, and I mentioned that I had a pair of clown shoes and we should utilize them. She seemed very, very receptive to the idea of wearing the clown shoes, so we climbed up on the roof and we brought this stool and we got right to work. I have many more photos of her wearing the clown shoes that I'll show at the end of this video. We see the clown shoes in the second photo, and personally, the longer I've looked at these photos, the less I even notice the clown shoes at all, which is a good thing or a bad thing depending on how you look at it. But mostly the reasons why I love these photos so much are, one, Isabella's facial expressions and the way she's able to manipulate her body in a way that keeps the composition interesting, and also, in the case of the first image, the lighting and the way that I was able to utilize the sky as the background. That, in conjunction with Isabella looking over me, essentially implying a story. When I put these two photos together, what I get is a bit of a narrative, like this vision of a manic pixie dream girl character on the side of the road hitchhiking her way to some local dive bar where she's playing an open mic show, and we both become stranded together, and I get passed out because of the heat or something, and I wake up to her looking over me asking, "Are you alright?" I don't know. Maybe no one else sees that in these photos, but that's what I see. Up next, we have some black and white photos of Isabella. These photos were taken with Kentmere Pan 100 with a Ricoh XR2 and a 50mm lens. So on this photo shoot, I only shot one roll of black and white, and frankly, it was a bit of an afterthought. I was primarily focused on shooting the color photos, but every now and then I would pull out my Ricoh, which had this roll of Kentmere in it, and I would take a photo in black and white. And these two in particular were a couple of the standouts. Up first, we have a photo of her wearing this white suit and sunglasses with her hair dangling and flowing downward. There's something interesting about this photo in that there's this implied S, but I don't know if you noticed it the first time you looked at it. Starting with her hand by her head and going all the way down to the hand that's connected to the arm resting on her leg, that subtle S curve is enough to kind of trick my brain into finding this a very interesting and dynamic composition. Not to mention the sort of uneasiness that you feel seeing someone contorting their body in such a way that their hair flows downward, perpendicular to the way that their body is facing. I don't know. Essentially, this photo just grabbed a hold of me, and I feel like it's ripe for inspection. And the second photo was an interesting one. I think it was the first one that I shot on the roll. You can't tell in this photo, obviously, because it's black and white, but the inside of Isabella's apartment building is pretty much bright pink all over. Her whole apartment looked like it was ready to go see Barbie. And there was this skylight up above that was just beaming the spotlight down into this particular part of the hallway, so I set my tripod up really high and I metered specifically to where the specular highlight of that spotlight was. And what I got was this photo, and I didn't tell Isabella to pose in any particular way. I was kind of just like, however you feel, just do that. And what she did, in my mind, was pretty genius. The only note that I gave her was to look upward, if I remember correctly, to look up at the skylight, and she did. And she did so with this childlike wonder, this childlike whimsy, and the simple act of her tugging on the shoelaces was enough to just give this, I don't know, a sense of innocence. There's this sense of innocence to the image, but also everything else about the image evokes a sense of isolation, or I don't know, maybe perhaps the idea that this person is radiating light off of them, illuminating a space that is overcome and overwhelmed by darkness. So something I want to mention and address real quick that I think I mentioned last month was that a lot of these readings of these photos, they come after the fact, and I don't think that I was intending to have a reading like that before taking this photo. Frankly, I just saw this space and I saw this subject, and I thought it'd be an interesting photo given the interplay of light and shadow, but I didn't necessarily think much more beyond that. And then this is one of those examples where you get a photo back and your mind starts racing with all sorts of implications and all these, things like symbolism, any sort of emotion that it brings out of you. And this is a photo that in particular brings something out of me that I wasn't really expecting, and I wasn't necessarily feeling in the moment. And I don't know, it's one of those moments where I sort of feel the power of photography. Anyway, I just wanted to say that. Up next, we have some photos of Connor in a bathtub. These photos were taken on ORWO NC500 with a Pentax K1000 and a 50mm lens. Okay, so if you couldn't tell by the first photo of Connor wearing that mask, this photo shoot was a bit more of a goofy one compared to the one with Isabella. It was less about making Connor look good and more about putting him into situations that were exotic or out of the ordinary, kind of like what I was mentioning before about the clown shoes and the beautiful woman. I was sort of thinking about the interplay and juxtaposition of elements and contextual contrast. So as with the other photo, I said, "What do you have in your closet?" And he said, "Well, I have a wetsuit." And I said, "Well, wouldn't it be funny if you were wearing the wetsuit in the bathtub?" And we both thought that that made the most logical sense. So he came into the bathroom with some rubber duckies and a pool noodle and some goggles, and we went right to work shooting. I set up these two LED lights that I have, and I set their colors to be pink and blue, and I just shot away. And again, you'll see a lot of the other photos at the end of this video, but in this first photo, there's this sort of deadpan delivery to the comedy of it all. I think I told him to just give me a very traditional stare into the camera, and he did. And I think that almost too cool for school look into the camera, juxtaposed with the absurdity of the surrounding context, is what makes this photo work for me. I also just love all the little details involved. I love the rubber ducks on his chest. I love the painted fingernails. I love the pool noodle. I love the reflection of the rubber ducks in the water. And I think another exciting element of this is the fact that I went with the color pink. I think that it just draws your eye in a little bit more and grabs your attention in a way that it wouldn't have if it was just regular white light. And in the second photo, we have Connor's feet up against the tile, and this was an interesting one. I forget where I heard it. It might have been a video of Lucy Lumen's that she did. She was giving advice on how to take more interesting portraits or something, and I think she mentioned the idea that just because you're shooting a person doesn't necessarily mean that their face needs to be in all of the photos. they have other limbs and things like that. So look at the way that their limbs react to the light, first of all, and the way that they can contort their bodies to their surroundings, and I guess go from there. So I was nearing the end of the roll, and I maybe had about 2 or 3 photos left to take, and they were all the ones I had taken before were of Connor's face. And then I just turned to my right and I saw Connor's feet resting at the end of the bathtub. So I said, keep your feet right there, and I put the little toy truck in the soap holder, and I turned the lights a little bit, and then I just took a photo. And there's just this real gritty and grimy and almost uncomfortable feeling I get when looking at this photo. I'm not really a feet guy, so maybe that has something to do with it, but I don't know. This was an instance where I saw the scans when it came back, and I was immediately glad that I took this photo. Like, I was thanking past Josh for having the foresight to turn to his right and take this photo of his friend's feet. This is just, I don't know, this is just one that for some reason I'm at a loss for words with. Almost like I can't really intellectualize why I like this photo so much, other than just the purely visceral feeling that it gives me of discomfort or something of that nature. Honestly, I feel like it's just sort of an intimacy thing. I feel like I'm encroaching on an intimate moment, even though he's wearing a wetsuit. I don't know. I feel like I'm grasping at straws here, but there's something about this photo that gets a reaction out of me every time I see it. So there you have it. There are some clusters of my favorite photos that I took this month, and honestly, it was a very big learning month for me in terms of the do's and don'ts of portrait photography. I have to give a big thank you to Isabella, who was instrumental and taught me a lot of different things, and I really look forward to working with her again in the future. Connor as well, you can bet your bottom dollar there will probably be a lot more photos of Connor in future photo recap episodes. If anything, these photos open my eyes up to the way that I want to photograph people in the future and the ways in which I can achieve the desired effect that I'm going for. It also taught me to be a little bit more conscious of the meaning of the photo. You know, a photo of a person isn't always just a photo of a person, if you catch my drift. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know what you think of my photographs. Let me know if you've got any tips and tricks for portrait photography. And before you go, hit the subscribe button and hit the bell to be notified when new videos are released. Also, be sure to stick around till the end of the video, and you can watch some more photos that I took in August. There are some other great ones in there that you're not going to want to miss. And with that, I'll see you all next time.